The Queen's Jewish Link presents the Jewish Living Podcast, the show that examines the many facets of Orthodox Jewish life. Here's your host, Izzo Zwirin.
Stand-up comedy is a tradition steeped in American Jewish culture. From the Borscht Belt days of Jack Benny, Mel Brooks, Lenny Bruce, and Sid Caesar, through later comic legends such as Jerry Seinfeld and Adam Sandler, and still today with people like Amy Schumer and Sarah Silverman, comedy has become synonymous with Judaism, so much so that it's become a trope in sitcoms. However, it wasn't until recently that the craft has made its way through the frum world. In fact, there's been a growing community of Orthodox comedians over the past several years, and today on the Jewish Living Podcast, we're fortunate enough to sit down with one of them.
My name is Eli Lebowicz, and I'm a comedian.
We will discuss the life of a frum comedian with Eli, and what makes Judaism so funny to begin with. Give me a little bit background information on your road to stand-up.
So I started doing it in YU about 11 years ago when I went to YU. Some friends of mine were running a fundraiser for Camp Hask, and they were doing a talent show, last comic standing amateur comedy night. And I was like, all right, let me try to do this. I got up there and did it, and did terribly. It did not go very well. I mean, I got some laughs, I think. I don't really remember, but it did not. I didn't win or anything. But it was my first time ever on stage. And then the next year they had it again, and I won it.
That was your first time ever on stage for any public speaking at all, or?
I think so. I was always that guy at like Friday night Shabbos meals that like made people laugh, but that's like a different platform. I mean, I think that translated to being able to like, hey, that was why I wasn't so scared to get up on stage, because I was just like, all right, I made people laugh at Shabbos meals before, so let me do this.
The guy who makes people laugh at Shabbos meals is more like improv comedy, where you just riff on whatever's going on at the time, whereas this is more scripted.
Right, but if you have the skills to improvise, for sure you can do it if it's scripted. So, and not the other way around. If you do scripted, you can't necessarily improvise, but if you can, riff off people's, lines at the Shabbos table, you can definitely do it on stage.
So I want to get a little bit more of your background.
Sure.
Who are some of the comedians that have influenced you in the past?
So I remember watching Seinfeld's "I'm Telling You for the Last Time," like when it came out on HBO.
One of the all-time greats.
Yeah, of course. No, I vividly remember the July 3rd. How do they know? Maybe the cows to Muff.
International Seinfeld Day.
Yeah, no, I just and no one understands. I actively remember that one. After that, I started watching a lot of Mike Birbiglia. A lot of people say that my delivery is similar to his, and just the pausing, and that's just like a lot of influence. Jim Gaffigan, specifically Jim Gaffigan's Netflix special King Baby, one of the best. Comedian Mike Kaplan, he was on Last Comic Standing, America's Got Talent. He's got the best actually Jewish joke I've ever heard, where he says, somebody wished me a happy Easter, and I said, actually, I'm Jewish, and we don't believe in happiness. Can't beat that joke. That is the best Jewish joke you'll ever hear. So those are some of the people that like stand-ups that I got influenced by. Obviously now like John Mulaney, Gary Goldman, some of the other modern people. And then I think growing up, but like a big part of my sense of humor comes from watching Seinfeld the show and The Simpsons. I think those are people that have a very similar sense of humor as mine will also say like they're fans of that show. So there's definitely a certain Simpsons, like some of those jokes on The Simpsons are so quick and somewhat so stupid sometimes, but they're definitely influenced my sense of humor.
So Seinfeld the show and Seinfeld's comedy is all basically observational. He doesn't really do a lot of storytelling, or definitely he doesn't do any political humor or topical humor. What about you? Your genre, is it more something in specific, or do you shy away from one genre over the other?
I think so. It's hard to narrow down like that. I think I think everyone has their style. I would say mine is a lot of observational stuff with a Jewish slant. People say, hey, do you do like regular non-Jewish material? And I have that a little bit, but I mostly do Jewish stuff because it's just what I think of it. It's all so all-encompassing, and I just think of, okay, what is a funny element about this Jewish topic? So, I will automatically just think of, okay, what's funny about davening, or what do we have about that? So, I think observational. I think Jim Gaffigan also, he'll just, him and Seinfeld will just take a topic and just analyze every aspect of that. So if I'm, taking Purim and saying, hey, what's funny about Purim? You have
Everything.
Other than, you're right, other than everything. But you have the idea of, people drinking too much Purim night, and then they have to go to the minyan the next morning, the hangover minyan with 200 kids and 400 groggers, and you're starting to think to yourself, maybe Haman got off easy with death, maybe death was too light of a punishment for the guy who tried to kill Jewish people. And then you're thinking about Shalach Manos and how everyone regifts Shalach Manos, and you always take we all do the same thing. We take all the good stuff we want, all the the good stuff, and then we basically try to regift all the junk we don't want, the black jelly beans,
or we donate it,
or but there also, I was thinking recently, there's something about an irony of the irony of God's hey, you're gonna have all this food for a month, and then for Shalach Manos, and then for a month you gotta get rid of it for Pesach. Yeah, and it's just you're oh, I'm gonna finish this, right?
And then when it comes to Bir Chametz morning, you're I did not.
You failed.
Yeah.
It's so I would say a lot of observational stuff, but there are times when I have more absurdist just things. But I like to think of, I have a whole aspect of comedy of awkward moments in Tanakh, or awkward moments of just things that I think behind the scenes that are here's something we take for granted, and let me analyze it. I have a joke that's not even necessarily a joke. I kind of just explain, and I say on Rosh Hashanah you're not supposed to eat nuts because the gematria, the numerical value of the word egos, which is walnut, is almost the same gematria as the word chet, which is sin without an aleph. What? I said, who made that up? The guy that owns the fish head store? But I just say that first line, and I'm not even telling a joke. This is exactly what is the thing. And it's just that we kind of sometimes take this stuff for granted, that we're just oh yeah, that's totally normal. Yeah.
So I want to get into some of the specifics of some of the jokes that you have, but comedy in general, I find it to be a very interesting talent. Is if I'm a singer, let's say, I can sing someone else's song, and it's a cover, and it's a talent in itself, just the ability to sing. But if I go into a comedy club and I cover your material, and everybody knows that it's your material, people are going to boo me, even though it's just basically the same thing as singing somebody else's song. So what do you think about the idea of taking other people's jokes, passing them off on your own, versus being a singer and singing other people's songs? Why is that such a different way that it's viewed?
Well, I think for singing, people are just appreciate the talent of the voice and the sound of the voice. So if you wrote the song or you didn't write the song, nobody really cares. Does this sound good? And that's all that matters. And that's where you can do a cover of it, and you can do a great job. People will like it a million times. So that's why there's so many covers of every song. But I think with comedy, you're looking for people's own insights, and what's your perspective? What's your, if it was business, it would be, what's your unique selling point? So what is your take? What is your perspective on the world? Right. Why do I care what you're saying? And so the number one rule is you can't take someone else's jokes. And I've had situations where people, I posted a lot of my jokes on the internet, on Facebook and Twitter, and people started, it gets passed around
as Twitter does,
but also like WhatsApp groups where no joke has any source.
Right.
So every joke is just yesh omrim.
Right.
So,
it just becomes just like a meme with just the words with
correct.
Quoting.
Just the meme. So I've started like being able to like put my name in the background and then my picture with the joke quoted behind it, so that you're going to share the entire image and my name will be attached to it. But I think just like any kind of intellectual property, if anybody writes something they want, okay, this is my idea, this is your idea. So yes, there are going to be similar people will say, oh, aren't you thinking, isn't it possible that there's similar like thoughts, parallel thinking? And I said, yeah, but like I think about the way I word something very, it's very hard for me to like word something the right way. And you'll hear interviews with Seinfeld, he'll say like you take like time to like get the wording right, because certain words matter, and you want to get that right, and the amount of work you put into that, you don't want that taken away because some idiot's just like, hey, I saw this funny joke, I'm just going to share a meme. And
right.
Yeah. So yeah, no, but you very much want the person's, perspective who's saying it, at least in stand up.
Yeah, absolutely. But in the same vein though, once you have told the joke and you've performed it and I've heard it, I don't necessarily need to hear that again. It's kind of almost as if it's a one and done situation. You come in, you do a lot of gigs in shuls, right? And a shul will hire you, and then you want to go back there, but you can't perform the same routine again like a year later. You have to develop more material, whereas a singer can go back into the shul, and let's say a shul hires a singer 1 year, and then they come back and they do the same thing the next year. People enjoy that. I always found it like a little bit unfair for a comedian that they have to continuously develop more and more material, whereas other talents, a singer, a juggler, something, they could do the same types of things all the time.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's also, singers also have a tricky thing, because at least for comedy, I have the immediate feedback, and I know the response is if you laugh, then I'm doing a good job. I say I have no idea how like Shweki knows he's doing a good job, because everyone kind of just sits there like it's Torah reading, and I don't know if, how does he know they're doing a good job? It's not like anyone's dancing or standing up and,
right,
shuckling or whatever. So, but, it is challenging. You have to come up with new material. But it part of the challenge is the fun of that, like to be able to, hey, what else can I make, jokes about? And there's so many, at least for Judaism, there's so many aspects.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the Jewish aspects. There's going to be a little bit of a meta question. So take me through your joke writing process. You mentioned a little earlier about how you see something and you see how do you make that funny. So my question is, so what do you do when you see something and you ask yourself, how do you make that funny? What's the next step?
Well, I think coming up with a kernel of an idea, I think I think of an analogy, or try to think of an analogy to equate it to, and that usually makes it work, because then I think that's a big Seinfeld thing too, is that to come up with some sort of comparison. Like I just wrote something about going to I just did a show in the Catskills at Beaver Lake, and I never really had much experience going to the Catskills, so I went to one of these pizza places in the Catskills, and just the level of like service and abruptness and you're waiting in line only to have like 2 minutes of service to you. I was just thinking, I was like, there's some joke here about, so I was thinking like, what's the pitch meeting for like, what are like all these Catskills thinking like, all right, we want something that, I was thinking like, is it a gas station? No, because some gas stations serve food.
Some gas stations are self-service.
So
the analogy doesn't exactly.
So it doesn't exactly work. And I'm thinking, what's something that has like really abrupt service that people have really long lines? So I said, oh, okay. So I said, let's make it like the post office, but we serve pizza.
Exactly.
So that's Kosher Restaurants in the Catskills pitch meeting, and and it came to me the same thing. Like you think of. There's something funny here, but isn't there an analogy to make it work? Like, I was, somebody offered me an orange, and I said, no, I don't really want it because you don't want to peel an orange. And I said, oh, that's the non-Jewish equivalent of not wanting to wash, not wanting to to eat bread because you have to wash and then bench, is not wanting to eat an orange because you're going to have to peel it.
Right. So the prep work. I see. So the analogy makes it more.
The analogy makes it more concrete because it lets me kind of tie it into something, even if because sometimes I'll make a joke and be like, that was so obvious, right? And then if no one else, thankfully there's a lot of human experience, and I'm like, okay, this works. Or I say on Shavuos, you're going to stay up all night learning, but you end up falling asleep after 2 minutes. It's kind of like when you go on a plane and you only bring 3 books with you because you delude yourself into think you're going to be reading, but 5 minutes in, you're like, oh, Pitch Perfect 3 is on, I'm going to watch that instead. If you come up with, there are just some things that happen in general that just are like, okay, this is funny, but I was in davening, let's say on Hanukkah, Rosh Chodesh, Hanukkah, and in the shul I was in, there was signs, 6 or 7 signs that said Al Anisim, Yalav Yavo, Mizmor Shir, Hanukkah Zabayis, and then Barchi Nafshi. It said all these things you're supposed to remember. And I was just thinking, I was like, oh, this is like a parking sign in New York. You're like, am I allowed to park here? And
then you have to work on it to get the exact wording right, and then you have.
Right. So that was I can't say that in a stand-up, but I just posted a screenshot I posted a picture of all the signs, and I said, when you're trying to figure out if you could park somewhere in New York, and it got a lot of likes because this is a relatable thing. So
exactly.
it's finding what I find funny, but also is my sense of humor relatable enough that other people will connect to it. And I think that's where The Simpsons and Seinfeld come in, and we're just having this, these shows are so, present and so about everything, about every topic, that you can kind of use those as springboards.
When people think of comedians, we basically have 2 images. There's the highly successful ones that can sell out large venues and have Netflix specials. And there's the ones that living out of their cars that are traveling from gig to gig. I don't think you're either one of those. So on a scale from vending machine dinner to Jerry Seinfeld, where are you?
Are you asking in terms of...
Not in terms of your fees, but in terms of the crowds that you...
Somewhere between a hot dog at a gas station, but only in Muncie.
I got them in the 5 towns also. And when I say we, I don't live there, but there are there.
Yeah. Wait. So what are you asking?
In terms of the venues that you're playing.
So a lot of it's everything and anything in between. I've done shows for 20 people, and I've done shows for 600 to 700 people. I've done dinners for YU, for Chabads, for school fundraisers, shul fundraisers, organizations. I do a lot of corporate, mostly school fundraisers, shul fundraisers or organizations. But I also did, me and somebody did a Grant Thornton accounting firm gig, which was the toughest because, as hard as any rabbi may be, as an audience, there's nothing like an HR department and an accounting firm to make it be like, oh, you can't say anything about anything. Don't make any jokes about being Jewish. And have you seen my act?
That's all of my act.
Yeah. So no, but it was a good challenge because it made me write. I did a lot of research about the firm. I did a lot of inside jokes about the firm, and I was able to really do it, and people loved it. And then the best part was, this is the most geisha cup of it, that they served drinks afterwards. And then the guy who organized it came up to me. He's like, hey, maybe we should do drinks beforehand next time. I said, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
That's exactly right.
Nothing loosens people up at 4 p.m. on a Thursday than a comedy show and then drinks.
I know that when you go to the Jewish venues, there's no shortage of food and drink beforehand. It's never come see comedian. It's always dinner will be served.
Yeah, generally there's food and then this person. So
which one gets top billing?
Always the food.
Oh, well.
Usually dairy buffet is my opener. Even at your shul, I think. But Jews again, Jews will come to any event as long as there's food. You don't even have to agree with what the event is. You know, you can have an event called like the Merits of Yasser Arafat, and people will still be like, will there be sushi? I should always check it out. It'd be rude not to go. So yeah, food is always the primary. But I think that's you know, gets people in the door, and I encourage them to have food because I don't want a bunch of people in the show to be like, when is the food coming? Or, you know, fold their arms. I want people who want to be there. And then it's tricky when I do like a Sheva Brachos or something, or, you know, sometimes even on Pesach programs, people are already there and they're just, all right, I'll go to the Tuesday night's entertainment. But you want like the advantage that your Seinfelds and your, you know, theater level Jim Gaffigan comedians are, people are going to pay to see them, I mean, granted, listen, I sold my own, this past Pesach, I sold my own tickets for a show. I did 4 shows over 3 nights of Chol Moed in Israel, and I sold my own tickets for the first time, and it was great. I sold over
awesome.
500 tickets over 4 shows. I know that doesn't sound like a lot because the venues were 600. Each venue was like 100 and 130 or 100 or whatever. Right. So it was a great experience that I was able to, you know, based on people who knew me and based on like, you know, getting the word out, I got 500 people to come to shows to see me in another country.
That's a lot more tickets than I've ever sold for anything ever.
Yeah, no, it was a really good experience, and also like, you know, kind of proved to me that maybe I could do that here. You know, just I would have to work on my Hebrew. No, I did them in English. But
I know you have a day job. This is not the only thing you do. Do you have any...
Mostly for the material.
Well, then that leads right into this question. Do you have any non-Jewish coworkers that you find yourself explaining things to?
So it's funny because I often think some of my jokes are very, very niche. And, you know, I say that my material is perfect for an audience that's, you know, frum enough and, you know, Jewish educated enough to get these jokes, but laid back enough to laugh. So like 12 people in the world. But no, I do find that like I'm able to tell jokes, and if I make coworkers who are not Jewish laugh, or, you know, it's great when I did a show in the JCC in Memphis in November, and, you know, people that aren't Jewish coming up to me and saying, "We love that," and I said, "You understood that?" Granted, it does happen sometimes when I'm on a plane and people hear you're a comedian, and I say, and they say, you know, the classic, "Tell me a joke," and I say, "This is not going to work," and they say, "Why?" Because I say, "Because you don't go to davening." So there are times that, I mean, I'm learning to branch out some of my material, I think, in my own, you know, way. It's just some of the way I just think of something. I just think of, okay, this is a Tachnun joke. Like I think about it. Like I just, you know, I saw a picture with Abraham Lincoln, you know, without a beard, and I instantly thought, this is Abraham Lincoln on Lag BaOmer. Yeah. Like but like it's just you know,
because this is how you think now.
It's 16 years of Jewish education. They got something right.
Yeah, well,
you know, I may not know Hebrew beyond school supplies, but you know, also.
In my experience, something happens when Jews are together. We generally aren't shy about being Jews, but when there's other people that aren't Jews there that are witnessing us do whatever we do that isn't weird to us, you find yourself having to explain to these coworkers or sometimes anybody else, like, oh, that's normal. Just here's why.
Well, I think we just don't. I think that's what comedy has gotten me to do is analyze Judaism from like a little bit of an outsider's lens and realize some of the stuff we do is pretty hilarious and pretty, like, I did a show at Cornell in the fall, and it was, you know, after a Friday night dinner, but they had a big Friday night dinner at the Hillel with like all these people, you know, a lot of Jewish people, and also it was like an inclusive Shabbaton, so they had like a lot of people that weren't Jewish there, and they had, you know, Kiddush and whatever, and then they had like an a cappella band perform, not a Jewish one, an a cappella band. And I whispered to the person next to me who wasn't Jewish. I said, "Oh, this happens at every Friday night meal." Like, because, and I was thinking the same thing, like an NCSY Shabbaton. If your Judaism is based on an NCSY Shabbaton, you must think Havdalah must take forever all the time. You know, it's just always 2 hours. Yeah, we're only Sephardi Havdalahs. Like, it must. So if you I kind of knock sometimes the way Jewish education doesn't, like, it should be treat Judaism like it's your first day of Judaism to some, like the way, the demeanor, the way things are taught. Don't just be like, oh, it's what it says. Like, I recently thought of something where it says, I said the way, like, again, the way we're taught is just everything is so bad, or it's like the best thing, you get all the ultimate reward in this, or it's the ultimate punishment, you'll go to hell, whatever. Yeah. And I just imagine, I thought of this idea of like, in the line, an imaginary situation, hypothetical in hell, there's a whole line of people, and one guy's just like standing there in line, and he turns to the guy behind him and he says, "Hey, what are you in for? Murder? You?" Well, I took my tzitzis off while playing at basketball camp. and those are equal and the same. Yeah, it's a weird scale, but so I by the way, something a great book that I read is from this former SNL writer named Simon Rich. Is a book called Ant Farm, where he basically has like 1 or 2 page like short like vignettes of like, he has one called the Ride Back to Beersheba, and it's like Avram and Yitzchak on the way back of being like, so let's not tell your mom about that, right? Want to get some ice cream? And like, so something like, again, I like to think of like awkward moments in Tanakh. Like they're just, we take these things for granted and we're just like, all right, this is what's taught. And we don't think about like, hey, like, why does it not say, I said another one I was thinking was, when Yaakov like is running away he runs away in the middle of the night from his father-in-law Lavan, because he gets a dream that like, all right, he's supposed to go back to Israel, whatever. And imagine he like wakes up Reuven, his eldest son, in the middle of the night, and Reuven's like, what? He's like, come on, we're going. Where are we going? We're running away from Grandpa. Why? Because he's a jerk. And why again are we running away from Uncle Esav? Because he's trying to kill me over the soup thing. Is everyone's family this messed up? Yes. Happy Thanksgiving.
One of my favorite things of yours is your bit on Yisro.
Oh, right. How Yisro, because it says that Yisro comes to Moshe. He hears about, the splitting of the sea, and then he comes to Moshe, and Moshe at this point has like a DMV or a kosher restaurant in the Catskills waiting for him, and everyone's just waiting in line, and Yisro sees this isn't wrong. And so it says, it literally says in the Torah, it says, Moshe, the thing you're doing is not good. And I said, I realized, I said, this is a really important lesson, because it teaches you that you could free an entire people from slavery and you'll still be criticized by your in-laws.
I'm only laughing at that because it's funny, not because it's true. I know that my in-laws are probably listening to this now, so it's not always true. That was just my disclaimer.
It might be true.
When I first heard of you, or actually when I first heard a full routine of yours, you had just had a son. It's been a while since then, but does your son give you material?
Oh, yeah. No, people say to me, I think said when he was born, they said, oh, you're going to get so much material from being a father. And I said, why do you think I did it? I have a whole aspect of material, and every day, comes up with stuff. My son's about 1.5 years old now. And, recently my wife said, oh, your son, he's already reaching the terrible twos. And I said, he's so advanced. And no, there's really a ton of material from it. And I even wrote a joke technically before he was even born. I remember listening to somebody talking about like being a father on, I think it was Paul F. Tompkins, about being a father on Sirius Radio. And he said something about like holding your son in your arms, and I wrote a joke that I said, you're so sleep deprived as a new parent that you just want your kid to go to sleep. You put him in your crib, hope he stays asleep, and you crawl back in your own bed. You pick up your pillow, you hold it in your arms, and you whisper to it softly, I didn't know it was possible to love anything this much. But yeah, it's really been, it's
exactly right.
It's really a great source of material. But even stuff that I'm just ready for when that time of life happens. Like I said, they should just sell minivans off the lot that come with junk inside. Like, they should just sell them with empty juice boxes, bags of chips. They should have 2 kids that work at the dealership just being like, hey, do you want them to make noise and be like, are we there yet? Are we there yet?
On the test
just
drive.
on the, like, I'll take it for, like, why are they selling a brand new Mini then? Who needs that? You need to know what this is going to be like.
You should also know how difficult it's going to be to clean for Pesach.
Yeah,
That'd be great on the dealership.
For sure.
Plaza Automall.
Well, I've also said Bed Bath & Beyond should also have, like, a Keli mikveh there.
Yeah.
And then you explain to them, and they say, what is it? I say, oh, it's a tub of dirty water that makes it cleaner spiritually.
So there's been a growing number of comedians in the last, let's say, 5 years that play specifically to Orthodox crowds. Let's say there's you, there's Ashley Blaker, there's Talia Reese. There's people that a lot of shuls and schools might.
Very nice of you not to say Elon Golden Modi.
And Elon Golden Modi.
the ones that everyone's heard of.
There's been a growing number of Orthodox comedians. So why do you think all of a sudden in the last couple of years has been this explosion?
I mean, I think it's been like that for a decent, consistent amount of time. I mean, there's also, Joel Chasnoff and Avi Lieberman, Mark Schiff. I think the places are hopefully they're realizing that Orthodox people want to laugh also, and that for some reason there is this stigma about comedy, and I don't really understand it. There's a lot of stigma with comedy. Maybe it's the late Sunnis aspect of, like, people think, like, okay, you can't be a serious, observant Jew and also have a sense of humor, which is ironic because most comedians are Jewish.
Well, the first
we
Orthodox
invented comedy.
That's true. The first Orthodox Jewish comedian that I would consider an Orthodox Jew that I heard was Rabbi David Orlovsky. Like, a lot of his stuff, yes, he talks a lot about it. He does do Torah, but he has stand-up style.
I thought you were going to say Lenny Bruce.
Lenny Bruce. Yeah, Lenny Bruce was very, very much not Orthodox.
But he has a lot of very Orthodox
yes, but
ideas.
I heard Rabbi Orlovsky first. So
Fair
for
enough.
me...
And Lenny Bruce is not an Esha Torah. You're right.
That's true. So for you, as a out there comedian that's looking to be hired, what are some of the obstacles that you go through? Are there any stigmas behind hiring a comedian?
You have to toe this line of being, clean, which I am, by nature, and generally, like, I tell people that even if I couldn't even tell a dirty joke if I tried on stage. As if
nobody would believe you.
Yeah, if I was like, I was with this one girl, you'd be like, no, you weren't. You go back to what you. Yeah, no, I'm well aware, which is fine because you got to be really consistent with your personality and your persona.
Well, your persona should match your jokes.
Right,
but most comedians do that.
Right, but I think it's like some people's, like, Facebook identities are very different than their actual real life, and
right.
I think my Facebook persona is also very consistent with, most of the jokes I'm posting on Facebook are jokes that you could see me saying. But I think the stigma that you have is that places go with, first of all, you're competing with shul boards. I don't know what goes on in these rooms. But imagine very much like the Democratic debate. Everyone's just yelling at each other, being like, can I have my time to talk, please? So that's, I imagine, it happening right now. So you have, people trying to be like, hey, let's do a mentalist. No, let's do a magician. No, let's do a clown that could say Kiddush. They're like, no, let's do a comedian. Like, and then one person's like, no, I heard a comedian once and he was terrible. Like, and that's really, like, often I'll contact shuls and say, do you want to have a comedy night? And I'll preface by saying, I know you had a comedian in 1985 and it didn't go well. Because that's what happens. And for some reason, it's the only genre of thing where you have a comedian and then 20 years ago, and then it didn't go well. Somebody swore, somebody offended the rabbi, whatever. And then they said, we're never having comedy again. Like, all comedians all of a sudden are punished by this one guy who dropped an F-bomb accidentally or something like that. And it's not like if you hired a musician like Shweki and you'd be like, well, no, we're not having music anymore. Like, it wouldn't happen. So you have to deal with this stigma of A, convincing them, hey, let's have a comedian again. Let's have a comedy night. And then convincing them B, to be that you can be funny, because there's very tough to be funny for a Jewish audience.
Right.
and be clean about it, because there's a very thin line between fifth grade Rebbe humor and like Laffy Taffy and clean, and being an actual entertaining comedian, and it's really, really tricky. So, but it's a matter of trust. I mean, people, I try to like convey, just be like, I'm telling you, I'm clean. I have a sphere beard in my picture. Like, I understand what is a clean comedian. I performed for so many of the frumest rabbis, and I told the rabbi once, I said before a show, he said, "Am I gonna be okay with this?" And I said, 75% of the material you'll love, 15% of the material you'll think is okay, 5% you may like and dislike, and another 5% you may hate. And at the end of the show, he said, "That was great. Don't change a thing."
That's great. So let me ask you about that. Do you get pushback on specific jokes? Every comedian has a joke when they say, and somebody came up to me after the show and didn't like this particular thing, and they told me off. Has that happened to you about specific jokes?
Yeah, listen.
And are there jokes that seems to be a recurring issue with?
I mean, I kind of know what often, and I've done this a lot of times, and I know what jokes can kind of push people's buttons, but also each crowd is so different, and there's some jokes that I think, oh, that's a little too far, but like it's totally fine. But then again, I had a joke I said, Nachshon ben Meinadav, the guy who jumps into the Red Sea before it splits, according to the Medrash, he jumped in and it went all the way up, and the water went all the way up to his forehead, and then eventually split. But he like had to take the leap of faith first. And I said, he jumped in, but it probably, it was great. I did that, but it was probably a really awkward 45 seconds before it split, where he's just walking in. Everyone's just like, "Dude, that's water." And his mom yells out, "He's not a good swimmer." And somebody came up to me and said, "You can't make a joke about Nachshon." And I said, "I just did." And but also even stuff that like I'll post a lot on Facebook, because that's Facebook and Twitter become like, drawing boards. I'm just, hey, let me try this, and if it gets a good like, I'm like, okay, this has potential. I posted a joke around Hanukkah. I was thinking about the idea of Persume Nisa, that like, publicizing the holiday. And I said, if your Hanukkah candles start a fire and the fire department comes, in a way that's like the ultimate Persume Nisa. Because and then when my friend's dad said to me like, I really like your jokes normally, but this is way too over the line. And like, I understand, fires are not a thing to joke about in theory, but like, I'm not making a specific, like, watch Anthony Jeselnik. He has no line, but like, everybody's gonna have different things. I performed for some really from Sheva Brachos where they say it's gonna be like Lakewood style. So I said, "What is that? What does that mean?"
We're just going to start about 2 hours late.
And you could only wear black and white. No, but like, I said the word kiss, and somebody yelled out, "Next topic." It was the weirdest heckle I've ever gotten.
Were you talking about the band?
Yes. I mentioned how Gene Simmons is really frum and is a religious comedian. No. Again, everybody's got their line of what this is. Okay, and it's pretty inconsistent, but like I know that most of my material, it's also from the angle you're coming from, meaning I think a lot of general comedians, the way they talk about what I bring to the table is being religious. And I think it's very stereotypical that like a lot of comedians are not very religious and they're anti-religious, and so when they're making fun of religion, it's like, oh, that's stupid. I don't believe in this. This is dumb. And I think what I bring to the table, and I think in a way some may consider it a Kiddush Hashem, but I don't know, but is to say, Judaism, I fully believe in this stuff. It's really funny though.
Right.
But like that should be okay. That just because I'm thinking of, not saying Kiddush Levana, that doesn't mean you're not thinking it. And I say it out loud. Like that should be that I have this relatable stuff. Just because I'm saying it out loud,
right?
Doesn't, and then in fact that should make it more compelling. I think. I don't know.
So my last question for you is, if somebody out there is listening that wants to get into this, what tips would you have to start out as for a starting out comedian or an aspiring comedian?
I think most comedians will tell you the same thing. I was talking to somebody even earlier today about, like, I said, all you got to do is just, like, somebody said to me, he said, I want to just get good and get good quickly. And I said, that's the problem. That I've been doing this for about 10, 11 years now, which is crazy when I say it like that, and I realize. Right. But like, you don't realize you have to take all these bad gigs that you've had are learning experiences, and are you doing better than you were the year before? And right. So are you performing more? I the last couple of years I've been doing about 50 gigs a year at least. I think I'm still on pace for that this year, maybe more. That's once a week essentially performing. I'm not talking about open mics. I'm talking about like actual shows at clubs right. or paid shows. You perform all the time. Write everything down in your phone. Right. I mean, the toughest thing is Friday night, because it's the funniest time of the week at the Shabbos meal. But you can't write anything down, so I often tell my wife, like, "Hey, remember this joke after Shabbos."
Yeah.
And then she'll come after me after Shabbos and say, "I was supposed to remind you of something." So, I mean, the name of my first comedy album is going to be called "Remind Me After Shabbos." That's
obviously going to happen.
Yeah, no, either that or Glula Build. I think that would be. But no, I think you just have to really work hard on writing your material right. and having enough. Yes, there's a certain amount of like, okay, somebody asks, can you do 25 minutes, and you only have 15 minutes, you still, Mike Bigelow will say, yeah, you fake it, whatever, you try your best. But you gotta know, like, tried and true. Well, is this your material that can work? Will this, should this get laughs? So this gets laughed 99% of the time, that is a good joke to use. So
yeah. And if people want to find more about you, or if they want to maybe book you, where can they find you?
My website is elicomedy.com, elicomedy.com. My Facebook is Eli Lebowicz, Lebowicz.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. I say that my grandparents got to Ellis Island, and they're like, "You sure you want to spell it that way?" And they said, "Yeah. Worst case scenario, our grandson has got a bunch of emails he's supposed to." So my email is lebowitz@gmail.com, lebowicz@gmail.com. My Twitter is @Eli Lebowicz.
Spelled the same way.
@ELILEBOWICZ. That's why my website is elicomedy.com, spelled elicomedy.com, just because I know how tricky. The funniest is when people will write Lebowitz spelled wrong, and they had to enter my email correctly. I'm just like, you got that part. But I wonder how many bookings I've lost by people spelling my email wrong.
It's entirely possible. I don't have the easiest last name either, but I think you take the cake on this one.
Yeah, well, you got the Z thing, so it's distinctive.
So, yeah, it's a lot of Z's.
And Izzo is
more Z's.
Okay.
Izzo short for Yisrael, in case the listening public would like to know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, now you know.
Okay.
And Ellie is short for... No.
Ellie is actually not short for anything.
No.
Like Cher.
Eli Lebowicz, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
My thanks to Eli Lebowicz for joining us this week. If you're a fan of stand-up comedy and its relationship to the frum world, don't worry. We have one more episode on this topic coming next week, but it's from a slightly different perspective. On the next episode of the Jewish Living Podcast, we will sit down with Talia Reese, who will give us a perspective of what it's like to be not only a frum female comedian, but also a Baal Tshuva. Until then, Kol Tov.
The Jewish Living Podcast is produced by Sroli Pikus. Our theme song is The Band by A.B. Rottenberg from Journeys 4. You can email the show at jewishlivingpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Jewish_living. The Jewish Living Podcast is recorded in conjunction with the Queen's Jewish Link.